So let's talk about the hero journey. It's a story structure that a lot of stories follow, and once you know about it, you see it everywhere. It's especially common in things like Disney movies and fantasy stories, Marvel movies. So it's these 12 steps that can be broken down into four stages. So there's a call to adventure when the hero um, is given some sort of an invitation to leave their ordinary world and do something extraordinary. Then there's the supreme ordeal or the initiation. So that's when they've left their world and they're starting to journey toward the ultimate thing that they need to battle. The transformation is when they hit the climax of the story and they either win or they lose. Spoiler alert, they usually win, and they undergo some sort of transformation. And then the road back is when they're headed back into their ordinary world and they receive some sort of reward, and they live in their ordinary world again, but in a new way. So while I go through this, you're going to be filling out the notes on Kami. So this first stage is the call to adventure. It's when they introduce the protagonist. They tell you a little bit about the world that they live in. So during this ordinary world stage, which is the very first part of the story, they're going to introduce the setting. So they'll give you some context, whether this is a place that existed hundreds of years ago or today, maybe it's in a big city. And they'll introduce the main protagonist in their ordinary world. So maybe they're a student or they are the daughter of the king. Usually, though, they're living in a pretty boring world. Their life isn't really that interesting. Skip through. The call to adventure stage is when the main protagonist is given some sort of a task or a problem that they need to solve. Maybe if they don't intervene, their community is going to die. Maybe they find out that there is some sort of a villain after them. This task usually invites the hero on a journey where they need to physically leave their home and head out into the world. So a couple examples here. A formal offer to attend Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry delivered by Owl Post. So obviously that's Harry Potter, that invitation to leave, the call to adventure. And Spider-Man, the bite from a genetically engineered spider causes a high school nerd to manifest powers. He was ordinary before, and then he gets this call to adventure in the form of a spider bite. Almost every time in a hero journey, there's some stage where the hero decides that they don't want to be a hero. They want to refuse the call and not do something extraordinary. So they're going to refuse the task. Often they'll go through some sort of an internal conflict. So they'll convince themselves that they're not good enough or they don't want to leave their world. And sometimes the step is skipped, but in almost every story I can think of, they do have to go through some sort of a stage where they need to be convinced to go on the journey. So the next stage is considered the supreme ordeal or the initiation. So this is where they head off into the special world. So the first part of that stage is the mentor or helper stage. And this is when there's either a new character or an existing character that rises up to help the hero along on their journey. They become an expert, so they're the one who kind of knows, maybe they've been on this journey before or they have information that the hero doesn't have. Sometimes this character is older, so sometimes it might be like a wise sage sort of character, like Dumbledore, Moana's grandmother. But sometimes it is a peer. It's maybe just somebody who knows more about that particular topic. So they're going to be a big part of convincing the hero to go on the journey. Sometimes they actually give the hero something that they need to successfully complete the task. Through. So crossing the threshold. So a threshold is the part of a door. So the door is here, and then there's like the line underneath between the room and the hallway. That's the threshold. So if you picture the ordinary world being the room and the special world being the hallway, they actually physically cross some sort of a threshold, some sort of a line. Sometimes that's a literal door. Sometimes it's a boundary, like maybe they leave their town and they head off into the wilderness or something. but they're leaving their ordinary world behind and they're going somewhere special. It's not always a physical change. Sometimes it's just like a mental shift, but often it is, London to Hogwarts, a physical change. Then they encounter tests, allies, and enemies. So these are smaller challenges. So usually the hero is off to battle one big thing, Harry Potter and Voldemort. But along the way, they're going to have smaller challenges. If you've ever played old school video games like Super Mario Brothers, that's kind of where my video game knowledge stopped, is about 1998. But you would have those big bosses at the end, like Bowser, and along the way you would have to stomp on a mushroom or a turtle or beat a ghost to a door. Those are the smaller challenges. So maybe the character has to battle a bully. But it's going to be something small, not the major event. During this time, the hero is growing, so they're becoming wiser, stronger, becoming more confident as well. So these are great examples. Hungry trolls, nasty orcs, riddles in the dark with an evil creature. Those are all examples from The Hobbit. At the Capitol, this would be the Hunger Games, all competitors, including the hero, train their offensive and defensive abilities in preparation for the Hunger Games. This would also be Katniss fighting off all of the other people before she has that final battle with Cato. So then we're on to, if you think of like the story plot pyramid, now we're on to like the climax of the story. So the biggest battle. The approach is like the lead up to that one moment. So maybe this is going down a big hallway to face that final Bowser boss, something like that. Maybe it's the night before they're about to go to the dragon, and the hero's kind of dealing with all of the stress of knowing that they're going to have to face something so terrifying. So usually the hero is struggling with the enormity of the task ahead of them. They're preparing, so maybe sharpening swords or studying spells or something like that. And the people who are helping them are rallying around them at that point. This is the final struggle, so the ordeal and the death rebirth stage. So death and rebirth is a major archetype in these stories. So this is like a resurrection, actually. This is that final battle, and within this battle, the hero is going to lose something that's important to them. Maybe it's literally their life and they actually die and are reborn. Sometimes it's their weapon. So Maui's hook in Moana, when it cracks, that would be a death rebirth. Maybe they lose a friend or whoever's along helping them, their mentor. And the hero is going to win. So in a hero journey, the hero has to be victorious in some way. It might not be against that actual final major battle, but they'll need to be victorious. Maybe emotionally, there has to be some sort of victory for them. In the reward, the hero is going to receive something. Sometimes that's literal treasure. So maybe they get a pot of gold, something like that. Sometimes that's a weapon, gifted this sword, a resurrection stone, or information. Or in older stories, sometimes it's a woman. So that damsel in distress sort of archetype. When the hero wins, he gets the girl. We've kind of moved away from that in Disney and pop culture now, but they'll win something. In some cases, the only reward is that the hero now has safety in their ordinary world, or like the feeling of a job well done. That final stretch is the road back. So the hero has to return home, but this is usually just a quick summary. So you aren't going to get the same amount of lead up that you got on the way to the event. It'd be pretty boring if, half the book was, let's get to this final battle that we need to fight, and then the other half of the book was getting home. So usually it's a quick summary. It's, we traveled for 3 weeks and finally got back to the Shire. It's a quick sort of thing. The hero throughout this time starts to understand the enormity of what they've accomplished, and they need to get back home to make sure that everything is okay there. So think about Moana coming back to Motunui. So when she's sailing back, or I was going to say the Lion King, but his return home is actually before the battle. But it's usually a very quick sort of return. It's not something that takes a very long time. Atonement. So maybe the hero has left home on uncertain grounds. Maybe they had an argument with somebody. They need to forgive somebody, or they need to forgive themselves. So they have to come to terms with something. Maybe this is just accepting their own position in their society. So maybe they've been elevated to the status of a hero. Other people are going to help them get back into society and help them accept all the things that have happened to them. And finally, we have the return. So the hero returns home in their normal world, but things are now changed. So once you've been on a journey, the world isn't going to look the same to you anymore. It's like going through something really difficult and emotional. You just don't look at the world the same way anymore. So they're going to take the reward back home, and maybe that's something that they share with people, or maybe it's something that they keep to themselves. In The Hobbit, Bilbo keeps the ring. So that's not something that he's sharing to make the world better. But when Harry defeats Voldemort at the end of book 7, movie 8, obviously the entire world benefits from Voldemort no longer being in power and no longer existing. So they're going to assume a new role, maybe just the celebrated role of a hero. Sometimes they come back to a parade, but they need to return back to the place where they came from. So that's a hero journey. The whole thing is 12 steps, and once you know the pattern, you will see it everywhere. We'll be applying it to Freak the Mighty. We'll be applying it to Moana. We'll be applying it to all sorts of shorter stories. It truly is everywhere. It's definitely an archetypal story.